imagine waking up one random morning and, upon looking in the mirror, realizing that what reflects your image no longer belongs to you? Your once familiar and human body is now a grotesque tangle of elongated, fragile limbs, resembling the legs of an insect, covered by a rigid and shiny exoskeleton that imprisons your flesh. Thus begins the drama of Gregor Samsa, protagonist of Franz Kafka's unsettling work, The Metamorphosis. One day, he awakens transformed into a monstrous creature, a giant insect. But this metamorphosis goes beyond the material. It surpasses the boundaries of the physical and dives into the abyss of the existential. Gregor doesn't just become a deformed being by chance. He embodies what his soul had already become, a submissive being shaped by the desires of others, a devoted son to the point of self-annihilation, an exhausted worker reduced to a mere provider for a family that slowly consumed him. Throughout his life, Gregor strived to meet expectations, bending himself into silence, renunciation, and sacrifice, living for others and erasing himself. His identity was gradually corroded piece by piece until only a void remained, an echo of what could have been. Upon becoming a beetle, he doesn't lose his humanity. He finally reveals himself as the alienated being that had long inhabited his essence. In the skin of this repulsive creature, Gregor becomes the ultimate emblem of alienation, not only in relation to society or his family, but above all, to himself. Kafka, in his genius, doesn't offer a direct explanation for this absurd transformation. On the contrary, he invites us to interpret it. Could this deformed body be the materialization of blind sacrifice, the distorted reflection of a life lived for others, where the self was relegated to oblivion? Gregor's family, accustomed to depending on him, saw him as a tool, a support. And so, when he could no longer fulfill the role of provider, they began to see him as a burden, a hindrance. Years of dedication were discarded without ceremony. The metamorphosis wasn't a rupture, but the logical climax of an existence marked by unconditional giving and complete self-loss. Gregor represents the tragic altruist, the one who erases himself, believing that his devotion will bring him love and belonging. But the contempt his family shows once they no longer need him exposes a brutal truth. Pleasing others is an illusion that charges a high price. The more you give, the more you lose yourself. No matter how much we seek recognition, approval, or belonging, these rewards are often fleeting illusions, like sand slipping through fingers. This compulsive altruism becomes a fragile currency whose value depends on the fickle gaze of others, a gaze that shifts, demands more, and eventually exhausts. When that currency loses its value, it not only stops bringing acceptance, it begins to demand a high price: abandonment, rejection, oblivion. Worse still, this constant self-giving can become not only useless, but devastating, slowly consuming the soul of those enslaved by the need to please. Do you genuinely like people, or do you know someone who lives to please them? This video is an invitation to reflect on the hidden cost of always wanting to be accepted, on the poison disguised as the sweetness of pleasing. Let's explore why this need to please is a trap and how we can break free before it consumes us. In the eyes of the world, it is nearly heresy to criticize someone who dedicates themselves to others. After all, what's wrong with generosity? With kindness? Is there anything more noble than offering oneself for the good of others, shaping one's life around another's needs? Such people are praised, beloved, central in the lives of many. But if we look beyond the surface, we often find a hidden core of unconscious egoism, a deep, silent yearning for acceptance, for love, for not being left out. Their kindness, then, is not purely altruistic, but a silent transaction. I'll do everything for you, mold myself to your desires, erase myself, and in exchange, you'll give me what I fear most to lose, your approval, your presence, your affirmation. Deep down, their generosity is an emotional deal, and its cost is often their very freedom to be. Let's start by understanding what it really means to be a people pleaser. There are many ways to define this behavior, but one stood out to me for its simplicity, found in the Merriam-Webster dictionary. Someone or something that pleases or wants to please others. However, this definition is superficial. It ignores the complexity behind what drives such individuals. The Cambridge Dictionary offers a more revealing perspective. Someone who cares deeply if others like them and who constantly seeks others' approval for their actions. This second definition is the guiding principle of this video and the critical lens we propose here. From this viewpoint, the people pleaser is not driven by pure kindness, but by a deep craving for validation, a thirst to be accepted, seen, and legitimized. At the core of this behavior lies a compulsion to mold oneself in order to win others' approval. The central concern of the pleaser isn't with themselves, but with how others perceive them. They live to meet expectations, to care for others' needs, often ignoring or sacrificing their own. Their motto is clear: others first, maybe me later. If the price is self-sacrifice for acceptance, affection, or even just a fleeting gesture of recognition, they'll pay it without hesitation. And this is where the cycle becomes dangerous, almost addictive, because the pleaser believes this effort will bring love, but what they often receive is just a shadow of love, a fragile, conditional reflection, always on the brink of disappearing. Earlier, I briefly mentioned my father, a man so wrapped in his narcissism that he never accepted any questioning of himself. He was never formally diagnosed, as he vehemently rejected the idea that something could be wrong with him. This form of self-abandonment not only distances them from their deepest self, but also leads to relationships marked by imbalance, relationships in which one person is endlessly exhausted trying to satisfy the other. Such relationships don't flourish. They suffocate. They are fed by a dynamic where one's identity dissolves to support the expectations of the other. Trying to make my father happy was like chasing a mirage, an endless struggle for something that was never truly within my reach. He was the one who sculpted, or tried to sculpt, the person I was supposed to be. He dictated my values, my preferences, my dreams. At some point, I no longer knew who lived inside me. What once brought me joy became a source of guilt. What I believed in became something to be denied, rejected, forgotten. A thick shadow formed in me, filled with everything that had been suppressed, all the qualities banned by the dominant figure, the father who demanded devotion and control. That Jungian shadow grew silently, fed by everything he wouldn't let me be, my desires, my goals, even my taste in women. I no longer knew if those were really mine or just projections of his will, remnants of the mold he tried to fit me into. When I finally broke free and chose my own path, I realized I had to rebuild myself almost from scratch. I had to relearn how to be. Though my stance may sound radical, I believe my journey is above all a warning, a cautionary tale about the dangers of living to please and the price we pay when we prioritize others' desires above our own. Even those we love can, intentionally or not, dilute our essence, distort our truth, and distance us from who we are. When you live to satisfy, identity becomes fluid, molded by others' desires. We become reflections, not individuals. And like Gregor Samsa, who defined himself as a submissive, tireless provider's son, we lose our ground when we can no longer fulfill that role. His transformation was not just physical. It was the collapse of an identity built around the needs of others. When he ceased to be useful, he ceased to be someone. The moment my father stopped being my compass felt like a chasm opening, but it was also the first step toward shedding that burden. A void set in, filled with questions. Who was I when there was no longer a voice dictating my path? Perhaps it was this very void that led me to dive into philosophy and psychology, that pushed me to create this channel as a way to reconstruct myself, seek answers, and find meaning. In the end, pleasing others at all costs is an act of deep self-neglect. It's a renunciation of autonomy, of the right to be whole, of the power to make free choices and to pursue what truly nourishes us from within. Those who live this way don't build an authentic identity. They build a facade, a fragile version of themselves dependent on approval. The archetype of the people-pleaser tends to struggle with saying no, something I deeply relate to. Unable to set limits, failing to say no when necessary, the pleaser ends up allowing others, often unconsciously, to take the reins of their life. It's they who dictate their agenda, priorities, steps, time, energy, resources, all offered with alarming ease, as if infinite, as if they cost nothing. But the cost is real and high. Pleasing others doesn't just consume the pleaser, it can paradoxically harm those who receive this unconditional devotion. Take, for example, the figure of the overly caring mother, the one who takes on all household tasks to ease her teenage children's burdens. She cooks, cleans, and works outside the home. At first glance, her intention is noble, but the effect is doubly destructive. First, she becomes overburdened, sacrificing her health, her dreams, her individuality. Second, she prevents her children from facing reality, from learning responsibility and growing up. By shielding them from the natural consequences of their actions, she robs them of maturity, making them dependent, fragile in the face of the world. This is the invisible trap of misdirected altruism. It's like lighting a fire with your own body to keep others warm. And if that fire isn't contained, it will eventually consume not just the one who feeds it, but also those who are meant to be warmed by it. The pursuit of acceptance and validation may seem like a gesture of love, but when it becomes compulsive, it devours. And the question that echoes is this endless chase for recognition really worth it? Is others' acceptance, this much-coveted social currency, truly so precious that it justifies the constant renunciation of ourselves? Or are we overestimating its value, trapped in an instinct that no longer applies to our time? The human need for validation isn't a mystery, it's inheritance. In ancestral times, being accepted by the group was a matter of life or death. We lived in small tribes where social exclusion could mean the end. There was no option to start over elsewhere. There was no switching groups. We were condemned to each other, and pleasing the tribe was a survival tactic. Their gaze, their approval, their protection were essential. But those times are gone. Today, the greatest achievement of modern humanity is relative independence. Yes, we still need others, but the weight of acceptance has drastically diminished. As long as we follow the law, we don't need the love or approval of neighbors, co-workers, or even certain relatives to survive. We can live and even thrive, being the misunderstood stranger, the eccentric who doesn't fit in. We can walk without the herd. It is possible to live without friends, without applause, without belonging to every circle. A concept I explored deeply in another video. The imperative to please, once vital, is now often an unnecessary burden. Of course, there are still contexts where pleasing plays a role. At work, to keep a job, in school, to get good grades, in relationships, to maintain harmony. But outside these specific situations, why continue feeding this insatiable hunger for validation? Human connection undeniably has value. But when it stops being a choice and becomes a prison, when it demands that we abandon who we are, it ceases to be a bond and becomes a chain. People who genuinely like us offer their presence as an invitation, not a demand. However, when acceptance becomes a constant battle, when we feel forced to sacrifice our desires, our days, our very being for others' well-being, is it truly worth it? A fascinating point in Kafka's narrative is the family's reaction to Gregor's metamorphosis. He was once their foundation, the silent pillar holding everyone up. But when life reversed roles and he went from provider to dependent, one might expect some justice, that the family would return the care, show compassion. Instead, what we see is the opposite: rejection, impatience, disgust. Those same people who had relied on him for so long turned their backs without remorse, revealing the rawness of human bonds, fragile, self-serving, often one-sided. This cruel dynamic reminds us that affection doesn't always come with gratitude. Loving or caring for someone does not guarantee reciprocity. The people we treasure most may not be willing to carry us when we can no longer carry the world for them. It's the raw reality of bonds built on excessive sacrifice. They dissolve when usefulness expires. This doesn't mean we must renounce kindness. On the contrary, acts of kindness are the glue of healthy human relationships. Helping others strengthens connections, builds real bonds. Since ancient times, this truth has been recognized and ritualized across religious traditions. The zakat in Islam, charity in Christianity, or dana in Buddhism all view benevolence as a sacred path to transcendence. But there is a vital difference between being kind and being a people-pleaser. Kindness comes from a sincere desire to contribute, to add. Pleasing, on the other hand, is often a form of transaction, an investment made in hopes of gaining approval, acceptance, love. Pleasing others is often a disguised business where the price is your own well-being and the expected profit is a smile, a compliment, a place in someone else's heart. That's why the act of pleasing isn't the same as genuine kindness. It is more often a performance, a continuous effort to secure a space that never feels truly yours. True kindness, by contrast, doesn't require applause. It is free, light, made of choice, not necessity. And true kindness doesn't demand self-sacrifice. It can, and should, be offered from a place of balance, where you recognize yourself as just as deserving of care as those you wish to help. Being kind doesn't mean erasing yourself. We can act with goodness while setting clear boundaries, respecting our own desires and needs, without expecting anything in return, without turning the act into a token for validation. The deepest lesson Kafka's Metamorphosis offers us is this: When we neglect ourselves in the name of others, we end up destroying not only our capacity to care, but our very existence. A depleted body and soul cannot carry anyone, not even themselves. If you have the habit of giving too much, of losing yourself in the service of others' desires, stop for a moment and ask, what about me? Yes, you. What do you want? What moves you, inspires you, gives your life meaning? I've been asking myself that question more and more, not just about life's major paths, but also in the small daily choices that silently shape our reality. For a long time, in my father's shadow, I got used to hiding my own will, suffocating it to accommodate the demands of others. Expressing desires became nearly impossible. I even lost touch with them, so much that I no longer knew what I wanted. I let myself drift into situations, commitments, gatherings that brought me no joy. I attended social events that drained me, kept up friendships that weren't real, maintained ties out of obligation. More than that, I followed paths I didn't choose, paths imposed by him, trails that never aligned with my essence. And that misalignment inevitably brought suffering, a fertile ground for emptiness. The pursuit of pleasing, when unchecked, is a guaranteed route to self-erasure. It's not just about giving up dreams, plans, or individuality. It's about handing over the reins of your life to someone else, becoming little by little an object, a toy in the hands of anyone willing to manipulate it. And no toy stays whole for long. That's why I deeply believe in the need to chart our own objectives, to define aspirations that arise from within, not imposed from without. It's essential to stand for something, a value, a purpose, a personal truth, and not fall into the trap of being the one who lives only to please, who molds themselves according to others' whims. Because if you don't know what you want from life, someone else will know it for you, and they won't hesitate to decide. Without that clarity, you become vulnerable, a receptacle for others' desires, a puppet at the mercy of every circumstance, an alienated insect, ready to be crushed like Gregor Samsa, consumed by an existence that was never truly yours, destroyed by the absence of an authentic self. So I ask you, what do you want? Not what others expect of you, not what you were taught to want, but what truly resonates deep within you? What makes you feel alive? Do you see yourself as someone who loves others too much? Have you recognized yourself in the role of the people pleaser? And if so, what set you free? How did you take the step out of that invisible prison? Share your experience. Leave your thoughts in the comments, your story. Let's continue this conversation, this journey of self-knowledge. And as always, thank you for watching. May these reflections find a home in your thoughts. And may we together become less like insects and more like humans.